A person who has suffered from satanic ritual abuse or any other kind of severe abuse needs to have memories in order for many aspects of healing to take place. And what I wanted to emphasize here in this video is memories and how the identity is built through having memories. As a child matures, his identity is formed through his experiences. When he repeatedly encounters abuse, he forms an abuse identity that locks him into an unhealthy self-concept. It is only through remembering this abuse that this unhealthy self-concept can be identified and replaced with a healthy biblical identity. This is a slow process and must progress memory by memory. The abuse identity explains why an abused woman returns to an abusive husband. She believes it is her role in life to be abused. When she is away from the abuse, she feels she has no identity and therefore returns to it. It is very difficult for people to understand why an abused woman would repeatedly return back to the home she lives in with an abusive husband. But the fact is, if that is her identity, she is very uncomfortable being away from it, because to be away from that is to have no identity at all. And it's better to be reinforced in an unhealthy identity than it is to have no identity at all. And so this is the sort of thing that has to be worked through with ministry. Many people live out of a false self all the time, having no idea who the true self really is. And this is something also that has to be dealt with as we go through the memories. Eventually, the Lord will help us find the true self, and the person can then have all of their parts merged into that true self. But this is a process that the Lord leads. It can be a very long process because we're dealing with identity, and a person's identity, even though it's really false and unhealthy, it can't be taken out all at once. It has to be dismantled a little bit at a time, and a new healthy identity in Christ gradually being built to replace it. When we help people, we have to be committed to help them for as long as it takes. It's vitally important for a memory to be thoroughly and completely resolved before the person leaves your presence. For this reason, ministry sessions need to be as open-ended as possible. Each person is different, but probably at least 2 hours should be the minimum time allotted for a memory. Unless you've been working in this for a long time, I find now I can usually get it done within an hour. For anyone to leave your presence without their memory being fully processed may endanger them. For example, if a person leaves before releasing the anger that was aroused by the memory, they might later erupt in anger, endangering another person or perhaps themselves. Others might leave feeling suicidal and do themselves harm. It has been my experience that successful ministry to severely abused persons requires laying your own life on the altar to Christ. In our microwave, instant everything, push-button society, we tend to want quick results with everything. We bristle if we have to wait in a supermarket line for 5 minutes. We're busy people with crowded schedules, trying to cram as much as possible into each day. This mentality has even crept into the abuse counseling theories, with some making claims that DID-SRA can be successfully resolved in only a few months. In my opinion, this is impossible and should not be attempted. When God calls us into this ministry, and only those called by Him should be involved, we should be willing to give as much of our time as necessary to bring someone to total healing. Those who advocate DID-SRA can be fully healed in a few months because the survivor doesn't have to have every single memory may well have a limited understanding of the depth of some person's abuse and how the abuse identity needs to be slowly dismantled and a new identity built. The pain and anger of a lifetime of abuse cannot be released in a few months. It is true that in DID-SRA, not every incident of abuse needs to be remembered. It is true that altars can sometimes be dealt with in groups. And yes, Jesus does come and comfort them and show them the truth after each memory. However, this in no way means DID-SRA can be fully healed in a few months. It is my concern that this mentality will produce partially healed persons believing they are completely free of their abuse issues, only to have them recur a year or two after so-called successfully completing their healing. This may result in hopelessness, despair, or even suicide. Abuse usually starts in infancy or when the child is very young and vulnerable. Most often the perpetrators are persons who have easy and regular access to the child, such as parents or other relatives, live-in partners, daycare providers, nursery school, or kindergarten workers, and so on. Therefore, episodes of abuse are seldom few in number. Most likely, the abuse will happen several times a week over a period of years. It is easy for a counselor or spiritual helper to deal with a few memories, see the person improving, and come to the conclusion that the person is totally healed. Some have actually claimed that SRA can be healed in a few weeks or just a few hours. Those making these claims mean well and sincerely desire to help others, but they are deceived. These counselors are bringing the presence of Jesus to their counselees and are seeing definite victories, but they mistakenly think that because Jesus has been present and dealt with some things that the healing is complete. However, there are 3 reasons why this is impossible. The first reason is that the abuse is usually far more extensive than we would surmise. It is true that a person doesn't have to go through every single memory, but the fact is they have to experience a considerable number in order to be healed. This is because the emotional pain of their experience is still locked deep inside and needs to be released. The pain of SRA is horrendous. This pain needs to be released a little at a time, memory by memory, in order for the person to be thoroughly healed. Some memories are so very painful, such as the memory of giving birth to a baby that was taken away and sacrificed, that weeks of grieving must occur before the next memory is dealt with. People cannot be rushed through memories with this depth of pain. Neither can the unremembered incidents be considered healed just because a person prayed a certain prayer and experienced the Lord's presence. When memories are not dealt with, a person feels some of the unpleasant emotions of their experience, but doesn't know why, and this causes depression and hopelessness. I was never abused, but sometimes the Lord allows me to experience certain things to reinforce the validity of the concepts He's teaching me. I am basically a happy person, but one morning recently I felt tremendous joy as I was preparing for my day. I wondered why this deep, effervescent joy was bubbling up so powerfully on that particular day. In answer to my question, the Lord brought to mind a dream I had experienced during the night. In my dream, I was a small child holding on to a stuffed animal, one I remember well from childhood, and I was sobbing uncontrollably. Someone had hurt my feelings, and the pain had remained locked inside all these years. Jesus released that pain, and that is why I was so joyful that particular morning. Something that had diminished my joy had been removed as I experienced the healing of a childhood memory. If my joy could be diminished over such a small incident, think of the enormity of emotional neediness in the satanically richly abused. As I've been saying, it takes a long time to heal because of the extensiveness of the abuse, and because of the depth of the pain, and also because of the abuse identity. During the years of childhood abuse, the person is attempting to form an authentic identity, but the identity formed is all based on lies. These lies need to be identified, renounced, and replaced with truth. This is a long process because we have to slowly dismantle the false identity and build a true identity in Christ Jesus. Now, some people might wonder what I mean when I say take a long time. Well, the first lady I took through her memories, the first lady I ever ministered to for satanic ritual abuse, had been incredibly abused by people in high places all over the world. She had thousands of altars. But we were done in 3 years. Now, that was not meeting once a week for an hour. I met with her almost daily. She was in our church, and she didn't work. She had plenty of time, and I took plenty of time with her, and she was completed in 3 years. So I've heard horror stories of people being in counseling for 20 years for their satanic ritual abuse and still not over it. I think when we let the Lord do it, that it doesn't have to take that long. So these are 3 aspects of SRA. It's extensiveness, the depth of pain, and the abuse identity that make it clear that the effects of SRA take a long time to heal completely. There's nothing wrong with taking time for healing something so important that needs to be done thoroughly. There is grave danger for those who have had small victories to believe they are healed and then experience the darkness coming over them again in a few months or a year. This can bring a sense of hopelessness greater than before. Those persons whose childhood abuse was extremely severe but not satanic ritual abuse may have dissociated enough to form several altars, perhaps as many as 50 or so. But persons who were subjected to satanic ritual abuse all through childhood will have dissociated far more times. The number of altars created through this abuse may even be in the hundreds or possibly thousands. When abuse is constant in the home and rituals occur 2 or more times a week, it may take the creation of several altars to get through one ritual. It is easy to see that the number of altars formed can be manifold. These individuals will be highly complex in their system of altars, programming, and demonic controls. If you found this video to be helpful and informative, you might want to visit my website, hispresenceonline.org. I'm Patricia Baird Clark. I have many articles there and more videos on DID-SRA and other subjects related to the end times. The message on this video was from my book, Restoring Survivors of Satanic Ritual Abuse.